Well, that's a doozy of a gospel. Bear with me as I summarize. All of this, all the protections we built around us will fall. And it will be tempting to follow the people who say they know a shortcut to the next spot, that they have the very thing that will save us, some elixir. Don't buy it, says Jesus. There will be dark days and it will feel like the sun is not shining because it will feel like war, or it will be a war. One will be against another like a plague, like an earthquake. It will be a famine. Don't be afraid, says Jesus. You will wake up in a prison, or you'll feel like you're in a prison. Your best people will betray you. Don't resist, says Jesus. The world is coming down around you, and Jesus says, disarm yourself. Here's the thing about Jesus. We like some of the stories. We like the ones about healing and taking up for outcasts. We like it when he talks about love. And we really like that story where he turns the water into wine. We like his friends, though Peter could be a bully, and Judas didn't turn out to be the best choice. We love to tell the story of his birth, and we dress up fancy to remember his resurrection. We are prone, however, to skip over that little part about Good Friday. We like to turn down the volume on his words about money. The thing about the last being first, and about how much he talked about getting up before dawn. Also about turning the other cheek and giving away our coat. Jesus says, stay, put down your sword, undefend yourself, not on a warm spring afternoon when there is a clear sky and everyone on the hike is of one mind about which trail we're going to take. Jesus asks this of us on the darkest day, when the circumstances around us give us reason to have our backs up, every excuse to flee, to grab our sword, to prepare our defense. In those moments, Jesus says, disarm. Ben, my son, and I were going out for dinner this week. And I asked him what he did at school on the drive to the restaurant. He told me. And then he asked me what I did at work. Fair question. I said, well, I was thinking about a sermon. And he said, what's it going to be about? Spiritual disarmament felt like more than I was prepared to unpack with a 12-year-old in the Panera parking lot. I said, transformation. He said, I know about that. I said, do tell. My son loves to read. He loves to read some things so much that he reads them again and again and again for hours at a time. His all-time favorite is the Harry Potter series. In the third book, The Prisoners of Azkaban, there is a character called Professor R.J. Lumpkins. He is an animagus. I might have that. It's close to what it is called. Which means he can turn himself into an animal, specifically into a wolf. The professor got this power only after being bitten by a wolf. That's important to know. Ben said to me in the parking lot, Professor Lumpkins teaches about transformation. He says it is very painful. He says something has to penetrate you to be transformed. I said, wow, you just earned yourself a cookie. Phyllis Tickle was one of the great thinkers in the last 50 years in Christianity in the West. She was a journalist, a writer, professor, and a lecturer. And I proudly note that she was an Episcopalian. Her voice was powerful, though, not because she was an Episcopalian, but because she stepped outside of her own perspective and took a landscape view of the faith. She articulated that Christianity in the West is not dying, but it is transforming. Something new in Christendom is wanting to be born. Something new is trying to emerge. Part of all of that wanting to emerge is birth pains. The plates beneath the ground are shifting. And there are different ways that we deal with the shifting plates. We've got some tricks. One of them is we push our feet into the ground, and we believe that if we push hard enough, the plates will listen to us and settle back down, and things will stay as they always have been, except that there never was an always. We have a living faith. This faith was born and lives and dies, and it will be born again. Chaos is part of the deal. Another option is that we pick up our things and we move to the next field over, where we think the ground is level, except that the closer we get, we see that that ground is moving too. It's giving and it's rising. Or we stand in the chaos and we close our eyes and we cross our fingers because we're just going to ride this thing out. Wake me when it's over. This is what I do on airplanes. Know that one. There was no Christianity the morning after Jesus died. There was a Jewish experience that people struggled for hundreds of years to make sense of. It was alive. It was grounded in Judaism, but it stretched into the Gentile world. And once it did begin to identify as Christianity, there was not one Christian understanding. In the early centuries, there were Christianities. And Constantine came along. And Christianity was bound up with the Holy Roman Empire. The religion that at its core was anti-empire married the emperor. It was a transformation. And with the scaffolding that came from being married to the emperor, the church developed and the church organized. And the church bumped along for some centuries, making creeds and canons and having important councils, until chaos rose again, and there was a great fight about who was the boss. Was the boss in Constantinople, or was the boss in Rome? It was the Great Schism. Each took their toys and went to their own city, and the church was divided. We landed with Rome in Western Christianity, and we bumped along again. Transformed. We bumped along again until the 16th century, when Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses and nailed them on the big door of the church, and the Protestant Reformation was born. We forget sometimes the first lesson of the Bible, that creation is born of chaos. The passage in Isaiah today, God said, I am always creating a new heaven and a new earth. The disruptions are opportunities for us to allow something new to come, for the church to learn and know itself in a new way. When I get really honest about this transformation thing, I'm all for transformation, as long as it transforms to me. No disarming is required. Psychologist Arthur Aaron proposed an intimacy study, which included looking into the eyes of another person for 4 minutes. No talking. It was an exercise in disarming. There's a video online of couples at various stages of intimacy. So strangers, a couple after a few dates, a couple after that have been together for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, and one couple that have been together for 55 years. They sit across from each other, nothing between them, and they look into each other's eyes for 4 minutes. Most of them are silent. Some people cannot help themselves. But in the silence, you watch the people grow less and less defended. In the video, the strangers that sit across from each other, when they are finished, one of them comments, "You can't look at a person like that and not see them." The couple married for 2 years, one of them comments, "How wonderful just to look at you." The couple married for 55 years. The one partner says, "We have never looked into each other's eyes like that before." The other says, "I realize how much I need you." They did the study also in Poland. Polish people, Europeans from that part of the world with Syrian refugees. They didn't speak the same language, but language didn't matter. At the end of 4 minutes, they knew one another in some unspeakable way. Something had penetrated the heart. In 4 minutes, it seems, defenses go down. In 4 minutes, two people are able to relax into the gaze of the other. In 4 minutes, something is shifted. Part of that is that they've slowed down long enough, 4 minutes, to have an experience of another person. But more than that, they have had a new experience of themselves. They experience themselves seeing in another way. The person being seen has not changed. It's the seer that's changed. Disarming ourselves changes everything. What if we tried it? I watched it happen this week. Ben and I left the parking lot in Panera and went inside. There was a group of 10 or so teenagers being teenagers. They were grouped between the door and the counter, not in line, blocking the pathway to the counter, talking and living in the moment. We could not get past them. I asked if they were in line. They said no. They apologized, and we scooted through them to the counter. At what point a young woman says, "Like I'm not even here." We had stepped in front of her, and she was irate. I apologized, and I said, "Oh, we thought you were with the group." She said, "What would ever give you that impression?" She was really angry. I said, "It is crowded. That is all this is." We got behind her in line. And she ordered her sandwich, and she went to the tables. I watched where she went. I was going to be sure that we sat on the other side of the restaurant. So we went to the counter and ordered. And then I felt a tap on my shoulder. She was standing behind me, and she said, "May I buy your dinner?" I had a really hard day, and that me a minute ago wasn't really me. I said, "Oh, wow, I get it. I get really hard days." I wouldn't take her money. She had given us a small, beautiful thing. In that moment, the person I wanted most to avoid became the person I most wanted to know. Suddenly, the worst person in the room was the person most precious to me. The gospel today ends with these words: by your endurance, you will gain your souls. I'm going to prove to you now that I'm a Bible geek. Some translations use the word possess instead of to gain. So hear it this way: by your endurance, you will possess your soul. I love that word. More interestingly is the verb tense. If you look at the older copies of the Gospel of Luke, they don't use the future tense, but the imperative. So hear it in this way: by your endurance, you possess your soul. For doing this work, you live into your souls. The work is your soul. There's an urgency and immediacy to doing this. You say, I want my spiritual life to be deeper. Here it is. It's immediate. We are told that what we possess, what we do and accomplish, how we appear, what we own makes these lives meaningful. I hear rumor that lottery winners are the least happy people in the world. Jesus is asking us to disarm from all of that, because there is another consciousness, another reality accessible to us if we will let these hearts be penetrated. I don't have to remind you about all of the chaos in the world at this moment. Hear the gospel again. All of this will fail. The protections that we build around us, and it will be tempting to follow the people who say they know a shortcut, that they have the very thing that will save us. Jesus says, don't buy it. There will be dark days, and it will feel like the sun is not shining, because it will feel like war, or it will be a war. One of you will be against another like a plague, like an earthquake. It will be a famine. Don't be afraid, says Jesus. You will wake up in a prison, or it will feel like a prison, and your best people will betray you. Do not resist, says Jesus. The world is coming down around you. Disarm yourself, says Jesus. We've been reading my book. We've been reading in Adult Forum Charles Eisenstein's book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And he talked about a study in the book by the University of Michigan. Researchers found that people who have been given a self-affirmation, were better able to consider information that contradicted their beliefs. Presumably, this made them feel less threatened and therefore less open. People given a self-affirmation exercise were better able to consider information that contrasted with their beliefs. The most direct way to disrupt separation in the world is to give someone an experience of non-separation. We are not going to ignore what is happening in our world at St. James. There are 3 candles on the altar today for the 3 children that died as a result of gun violence in a school this week. But this church will not be dictated by divisions drawn by the world, our political world or otherwise. We are being told who our enemy is, and in many cases, that is our neighbor. Jesus is calling us to build a new way. We've been deceived by how pretty we've made Christianity in the West. It's really pretty. It makes us think that the Christian path should feel as pretty as we make it look. We're not going to know what it's going to look like because it hasn't been born yet, this new thing. But I have given birth, and I did it without medication for pain. And I learned some things from doing it that I think apply to the grand church that might be born, and what we might do together in this place, and what I hope for my heart and for yours. There were moments in giving birth that I wanted to lash out and kill the person I loved the most, who was drinking a Coke beside me. There were moments giving birth when I thought it would kill me. It was really messy and it was really hard. But together with adopting children, giving birth to them was the most beautiful experience of my life. I don't know what this other way will look like, what is trying to be born. I know that it will be messy. I know that if we go about this hard work, that we're going to step on each other's toes getting there. But I think it's worth the risk, and I think it's worth the trouble. My heart desperately needs it. I know our world does. I think that my soul and your soul and the soul of the world is at stake. Someone asked the Dalai Lama, "What did you do when China invaded Tibet?" And he said, "I put down my sword and I walked into China. I put down my sword and I walked into China." In this way, we possess our soul. It's pledge season around here. In the grand scheme of the church, my job is the spiritual thing and the vestry's job is the money thing. I hope you'll give some money around here, but what I really hope is that you will pledge your life to this work and that you'll do some of that work here. That you will come here, that you will bring your heart here. And that we will realize together how much we need one another. Amen.